Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our second installment of the Seder Whiz, How to Run or Lead an Unforgettable Seder. In our first lesson last week, we really spoke about some practical ideas that we can implement if we prepare well enough to enhance the excitement of the Seder, the fun, the engagement, and the meaning. Last week we spoke about some goals. We should set some goals for ourselves. I mentioned 3 goals. We spoke about getting people more involved by giving them advance notice before the Seder. We spoke about ideas for icebreakers, if you'll have people by the Seder that may not know each other. A little bit of props and decorations. I gave you some ideas in the handout last week. We focused a lot on games, different games that can be used as educational purposes, and games that could be used for engagement. And we also spoke about ideas for contemporary discussion and inspiration on how others can share, whether it's on a general Pesach theme, whether it's in a theme related specifically to the Hagaddah, or whether it's on a theme of, I would guess, freedom or modern Judaism today. And if you missed last week, or if you're here last week and you want to review, just let me know and I'll email you the video recording of last week's class, and I can email you also if you want to have the notes, the handout via email. I'm very happy. Just let me know, message me, tell me now, and I'm very happy to send it to you sometime tomorrow. In today's lesson, I want to go a bit more in depth and not necessarily speak so much about the general ideas of how we can get people involved. On how we can get people involved beforehand and with games, but I'd like to go a bit more in depth and create tonight more of an educational experience for ourselves as well. I mentioned this last week, but I'll ask the question again. Does anyone here from time to time give a presentation? Does it ever happen that you give a certain presentation and then a year goes by and you don't give that presentation for a year, but you're asked to give the same presentation again? Anybody? Would you wait a year without giving that presentation and then show up and give that presentation without maybe checking through your slides, seeing if your research is up to date, seeing if you know exactly whether the slides are working? Would you look through your notes, or would you just get up there, give the presentation, and not even check to see if the slide is even on the computer or on your USB? You check in advance. And I think the same thing applies to the Seder, to the Hagaddah. If we're going to be leading the Seder, a year has gone since we've looked at it before, so really we should peek into the Hagaddah a little bit for a moment, just to ensure that we have a proper command of what's going to be going on during the night. It's interesting, a lot of times when I discuss with people the idea of shul and shul going, so a lot of times you'll have people will say, Velly, why isn't shul more exciting? Why do we just sit down and we open up the Siddur and we just read from these books and we don't understand the Hebrew, and sometimes it's even more difficult to understand the English? Why don't you implement some discussion? Why don't you implement some meditation? Why don't you implement some more excitement? Yet the very same person that would ask a question like that, when they have the chance and their family is sitting around the Seder table, they'll end up doing the same thing, just giving out books to everyone and asking everyone to read, sometimes a Hebrew that's very hard to understand, and sometimes with a English translation that is even harder to understand. So really, what I'd like to do tonight is actually go into the Hagaddah and go through some of the themes here, show what is the central theme that is going through the Hagaddah, and this will empower us when we're actually leading the night. We shouldn't be as lost as everyone else. We should have at least a small little idea ourselves about what is that common thread that runs through the Hagaddah. What can I use to be my central focal point of the Hagaddah, to be able to keep everyone together and to make sure the night goes as smoothly as possible, and once again we can take as much inspiration as possible. Asking questions is embedded in the way that Jewish people educate their children.
Not so good.
Not so good.
Now you tell me. That doesn't matter. Splitting of the what? See.
So asking questions is embedded in the way that Jewish people educate their children. The most prominent reference to education in the Torah is the verses that discuss how we have to teach the Exodus story to our children. And in halakha, in Jewish law, we're told that this cannot be a frontal experience. In other words,
Probably not enough.
it's a start.
That's right. It's right, Matt, I'm only joking.
So in Jewish law, in halacha, this cannot be a frontal experience. You cannot start the Hagaddah by just talking. It must be as a response to a question from a child or from someone else. And that's why so many of the customs throughout the night are meant and are designed to inspire the curiosity and to inspire the children or the child from within to ask the question, why? And from the earliest of age, as Jews, we teach our children to question, to wonder, to reflect, and to inquire. In Judaism, no questions is not a sign of faith. It's lack of depth. Again, in Judaism, no questions is not a sign of faith. No questions is a lack of depth. They say a story with the Jewish Nobel Prize winner. He was a physicist. I think he was based in New York. His name was Isidore Rabi. And when he won the award, he was asked, what was the secret to his upbringing? And he said every day when he would come home from school, his mother did not ask him, what did you learn today? Were you a good boy today? Did you learn well today? Did you behave well today? She asked him, did you ask a good question today? That was the key to his success. So what I'd like to do now is to ensure that we can facilitate not just the actual Seder, like we spoke about last week, but the Hagaddah itself. And of course, remember what we spoke about last week. Everything that we're going to try to discuss tonight is in sound bites, it's in tidbits, it's not in speeches. So, the first thing, when preparing the Seder, the first thing we have to make sure that we have is a Seder plate. So if you look in the handouts that I've given you, you can look on the third page. We don't have to go through it, but you have it there. It has there the 6 things that we need for the Seder plate. Everyone sees that? So you can be prepared. The next thing you need is a shopping list, is a checklist. So if you look inside your handout that I've given you, you'll see the basic Seder checklist. And the reason why I say the basic Seder checklist, because I'm not giving you anything there that you need for your recipes, on the roast you're going to cook, and the gefilte fish you're going to make, and the soup you're going to make. That's up to you. Here is just the basic things we need, like Hagaddahs, matzah, the Seder plate, wine goblets, maror, etc. You can use this as your own checklist on the night. And maybe later on tonight, if anyone has anything they can add to the checklist, we'll go around the table and we'll ask people to share what what we're missing. On the night, really, you can tell everyone that there's 4 things we really need to do tonight. At the end of the day, there's 4 things that needs to be done tonight. We need to tell the story. So that could be done in a multi-dimensional, interactive experience, fun for everyone, including the kids, like we spoke about last week. So that's number 1. We have to tell the story. Some people tell the story by passing around a book and reading. Other people, and we'll discuss tonight, can make it a bit more interesting than that. Number 2, there's a mitzvah to eat matzah and eat a lot of matzah. So we're going to be eating matzah tonight. Simple as that. Number 3, to drink 4 cups of wine or grape juice for the children, or grape juice for someone who is not allowed to or shouldn't be drinking wine or alcohol. And 4, to eat some bitter herbs, or at least some romaine lettuce. That's it. That's what it comes down to. That's the 4 things. If anyone's in a hurry, right? If you only have 30 seconds or 30 minutes to run your Seder, tell the story, make it as interactive and multidimensional and fun and interactive as possible. Eat matzah, a lot of it. Eat more lettuce, and have 4 glasses of wine. But obviously, as you know, to get through those 4 things, there's a process. And the process is the 15 steps of the Hagaddah that I like to call the 15 steps of personal freedom. What I've given you in your handout is those 15 steps in a very concise and basic kind of how-to, but it's a bit more interesting and a bit more fun, and it's written in a interesting kind of way. That you have your 15 steps. And then if you look at the end of the handout I've given you, I've done a bit of a version 2.0, and this is something I personally compiled. This is something I personally put together myself. So what it does is it tells you the step. It tells you very basically how to do the step. And then each step I've written up in very, very readable, I believe, English, the Kabbalistic underpinnings of what we're doing. So I'm just showing you can go from the most basic, or you can do something like I've personally put together and I share with people. I use it by our Seder, is not just what we're doing and how to do it, but also the Kabbalistic significance and how it speaks to us personally in our personal journey to freedom. Everyone with me so far?
Yeah.
Any questions? So the 15 steps of the Hagaddah, I recommend people, if you're planning on doing a proper Seder, to use the 15 steps as your focus. To use the 15 steps of the Seder as the thread that keeps the entire Seder together. And the way you can do it is by doing something I've done in the room. You can see I have the 15 steps printed around the wall. You could do something like that in your house if you're adventurous enough. Or you can keep something like this by the table. And as the Seder goes on, when you go through the steps, you can either choose one person to be that every time when we get to the step, they read the step out, or as the night goes, someone else gets a chance to read the step. So I've given you a perfect example of how it would look like. Go into your student books, into the handouts. Before the first step, which is Kadesh, to make Kiddush, where you see there are 15 steps of freedom, you can have someone is chosen around the table to read out. And it's a great introduction, and everyone then knows what to do. It's been a crazy week. The world, with all its worries and bothers, is still clamoring for your attention. The first step is to forget all that, leave it behind, enter into a timeless space where you, your great-grandparents, and Moses all coincide. Begin with a full cup of sweet red wine, a full cup of hundreds of generations of rejoicing and tears and celebration and wisdom, and of doing what we are going to do tonight. Fill cup with wine, that's cup one. Have someone else fill your cup, return the favor. This way, we are all like nobility, whose cups are filled by someone else. Make sure your cup holds at least 86 mil, a little more than 3 ounces. Everyone stands and says Kiddush together. The rest of the year, when the sanctity of Shabbat or the festival is pronounced upon a cup of wine in the Kiddush, one person says Kiddush for everyone else. Tonight, each man, woman, and child recites every word together. Drink and get ready for some serious relaxing. Relying on a cushion to your left side. Remember the ancient times when we used to recline on couches while stuffing down grapes? That's what we are dramatizing by reclining now. We are not just free, we are masters. So this is an idea of something, how you can use these steps. Don't get worried. I'm not going to be reading all these steps here tonight. I just want to read step 1 to give you a basic idea. You can do something like this. You can do something even shorter. I can send you some links of places where you can get these steps that you can use before each step to read out a step like that. If the crowd is a bit more mature, if you think the crowd can handle something, you can even go ahead and do the Kabbalistic or the personal freedom and meaningful tidbits that I put together. So I'll just read one. For example, Kaddish. Step, we're going into here now. The step is Kaddish. Say the blessing on the cup of wine and drink the whole cup while leaning to the left. A bit shorter, right? Personally speaking, Kaddish means to sanctify, but also can be translated as separate or transcend. The beginning of all journey is separation. You've got to leave somewhere to go somewhere. To begin the journey to liberation, one must make a move. Laziness and sluggishness are the antithesis of the Exodus. A free person is an active and proactive one. True freedom is to challenge the status quo. To live a free life and express your full humanity means never to be complacent and satisfied with your personal growth and your moral achievements. So that's taking the step and kind of making it a bit more practical, meaningful in our day-to-day lives. So this is the idea I just want to give you how you can use, and it may be something you can use, it may not, but this is something how you can bring, like I said before, just to bring the Seder to some kind of starting point and some kind of ending point. Use the 15 steps as your guide through the Seder. Choose one person to do the reading. Give everyone a chance to do the reading. If you have people around the table that are patient, you can do a bit of a longer reading. If you have people that aren't patient, at least do it from the Hagaddah itself. The Hagaddah will give you just the basic steps of what to do, and therefore the Seder will feel like it's moving in these steps. One step, we've done, moving on to the next step. In between, I'll show you how you can do your games and the interactive discussion and all that. But then, once you've run out, or it's going on for too long, you move right back to your steps. This way, the Seder is not just another Shabbos meal, it's not just another family dinner, it's really the Pesach Seder. Seder means order, is that right? Seder means order, and this is the order that we are following. So let's now go inside the Hagaddah a little bit. And I'll show you, and this is our next step, to gain a bit of a command of the night. I'd like to show you the order of the Hagaddah, really what's going on. And we'll use the Haggadahs that I've given you. We'll do the Hebrew, a little bit of the English. I know it'll be very different Haggadahs that you may have at home, but we'll do our best trying to get an understanding of and a command of the Hagaddah. So page 12 and 13. If you look on top of page 12 and 13, it shows you the 15 steps of the Pesach Seder that I just spoke about and that I gave you with the elaborate instruction and insight in your Seder handout. And of course, we begin the night with Kaddish, and remember that this year it's Friday night and Saturday night. So there's special Kiddush that we do. There's the Friday night stuff that we're going to add. You'll see on page 13. When the festival occurs on Shabbat, say the first, right? Say first the 6th day, Yom HaShishi. Move on together with me to 14 and to 15. Remember that your Hagadahs at home will be different, but I'm just bringing up to you to remember this year you shouldn't come to the Seder and be totally lost as to how you make Kiddush, because Friday night Kiddush is going to be slightly different. We add the special part for the Friday night. And Saturday night, Kiddush is going to be slightly different because we add a little bit for the Saturday night as well. But if you have a Hagaddah with English and English translation, the instructions will be there for you. So be prepared. Once again, remember what I said. This is a wonderful time to do icebreakers. It's at this point some of the icebreakers that we spoke about last week, asking around who is someone from history that they would invite to their Seder. Remember, that was an icebreaker we did. Remember the game we played, who knows, I know. That would be a time where this icebreaker can be implemented. Another wonderful idea is a suspense builder. At this point, you can build a suspense builder. I won't make it too suspenseful for you. I'll tell you, you're preparing to have Elijah the prophet come to your Seder in person. And you don't need much for it. You need a white sheet, a beard, preferably white, and that's it for the costume. That's it, a white sheet, a beard, if you want, maybe a walking cane. And you say something like, we have a special guest that's going to be coming tonight. They're running a bit late. They're not here, but we'll start the Seder anyways. So you're anticipating the special guest. You can provide periodic updates on his travel status. You can say he's been held up for ethnic profiling issues. Something like that may happen. And if you're thinking in your mind that my family's not the type, my family's not going to go for this, then you for sure should do this. If you're sitting here and thinking we can't do this, my family will never go for this, then you have to do it. That's really what you have to do, right? So you're giving updates. He's being held up at the airport, at customs for, like I said, ethnic profiling issues. Obviously, you have that one relative that's game to do this, or it'll even be more fun if it's that one relative that no one would have ever imagined would do something like this. By Birkat HaMazon, they go out and they wrap themselves up in a white cloth, and they put on the beard, and they get the walking stick. And then, when everyone's gone to the door, the children specifically, for the end, the Tzafon, Berach, Hallel, Nirtza, towards the end, when you open the door to welcome Elijah the prophet, there that relative walks in, and everyone has a good laugh. Sometimes the children get a bit scared, but at least they'll have a memorable Seder experience. What do you do on the second night? How do you Don't do any suspense. Everyone's expecting Elijah to come from one door, direct everyone's attention to one door, and have the family member come from a different door, or to climb through the window, or you can use your imagination. It's fun. The kids love it, the adults love it, especially if you choose the right person, and especially if, like I said, if your family is not the type, make them the type. I heard you say Brian. Brian has a beard already. He has an orange one from a few months ago. He'll remember. Okay. So after you make Kiddush, we're not going to go through all the steps and everything in detail. Follow me on page 16. You have Orchatz. Now, this Hagaddah is giving you instructions. It's saying, wash the hands without reciting the blessing. Okay, if your Seder is going to be rushed, and if you just want to have the most basic and quick Seder, you can get someone to do that reading, or you can do something a bit more elaborate, like I've given you in your handouts. So we wash our hands, we don't make a blessing, and that's because, as you'll read in the handout, in Jewish law, when you dip food into a liquid, we're meant to wash, but unlike bread, we don't make a blessing. It's also meant to inspire the children to ask. This is weird. We're so used to family Shabbat dinners or Chag dinners where we wash and we make the Netilat Yadayim. What's going on over here? Part of the questioning. The next step is Karpas, where we dip. Every family has their custom, whether it's potato, onion, parsley, celery, whatever your custom is. Yachatz, you break the middle matzah. The smaller piece remains in between the two matzahs. Your larger piece gets put away for the afikomen for the children to find later on. And then you move on to the magid. Again, I'm not going to go through all these steps. You have it in your student handout. It's something you can really elaborate on, have someone read, and have someone explain before the night begins. Then we move on to magid. This is really where we spoke about is the opportunity where we should be speaking about freedom, where we should try to be gleaning inspiration from the Pesach night, from the Seder night. So we begin with the Magid begins, if you follow me on the bottom of page 17, Heilach Ma'anya. Anyone know what language this is in? Aramaic. This is a part, interesting just for you to know, this is a part in the Hagaddah that was added on much later. I know it was added on much later because it's in Aramaic, and the rest of the Hagaddah is in Hebrew. It was added on by the Jews after the destruction of the first temple while they were living in Babylonia. And I know it was added on later because it concludes for a blessing for the redemption. Only a people that are in exile ask for a blessing for redemption. But my question to you is, many families will read this out loud. And we say something like this: whoever is hungry, let them come and eat. Whoever is in need, let them come and conduct the Seder at Pesach. Don't you think it's a bit late to be inviting guests? Has that ever bothered you? I mean, is this just some type of token guest welcoming from our homes weeks after we've invited everyone? The Seder is about to start, and now we're making this proclamation: whoever is hungry, come eat. Whoever is needy, come join us. I think it's a good question, and I've supplied the question for you in your student handout with an elaborate answer. But I just put that there to show you how you can take something which is a page long and turn it into a soundbite and turn it into a tidbit. So the question is, why invite now? Isn't it a bit late? And the answer that we can suggest, there's many answers given. But an answer is that we're actually inviting ourselves, and we're inviting the people around us to be truly mindful and to be truly present at the Seder. Every single one of us is hungry. Every single one of us is needy. We may not be starving or hungry for physical sustenance, but we're hungry for meaning. We're hungry for purpose. We're hungry to go beyond the specific and unique challenges that each one of us are facing. Every one of us are needy. We may not be needy in a financial state, but we may be needy in an emotional state. Everyone needs something. So at the beginning of the Seder, how do we begin? To get the night off on the right tone, we invite ourselves to really come and be present by this Seder experience, to truly experience freedom. Not to let ourselves be enslaved in our Egypt 1 second longer. So we say, whoever's hungry, whoever's needy, come celebrate Pesach. If you're hungry for inspiration, if you're needy for meaning, come and absorb the message the Hagaddah is about to give us. Don't just sit there. Be involved. Welcome yourself. Welcome others. Be present. You can rush through the Hagaddah to get to the main course, but then you've just remained trapped. That's why I think we begin the Magid with this statement. We're inviting ourselves. Rush through, you've missed the point. But we're all hungry and needy. Let's tap into the message of the Seder and see what it teaches us. The next step we move on to, you follow with me on page 18 and 19, is the Manishtana. The Manishtana is where the mitzvah of reciting the Hagaddah begins, because remember I told you at the beginning of today's session that the mitzvah of the Hagaddah is carried out in response to questions. The verse in the Torah, the pasuk in the Torah, that tells us to have a Seder, it says that one day when your children will ask you, this is what you should say to them. We were slaves. So you have to tell them once they ask. And that's the purpose of the Manashtana. The whole purpose of the Manashtana is the Hagaddah cannot begin until the Manashtana begins. If there's no children present by the Seder, adults ask the Manashtana, because everyone has a child within. Everyone has a child within that's learning, that's looking to grow and to look for more and to question and to learn more. This is a great time, like we spoke last week, for one person in the family to be in charge of the Manashtana, whether it's for people to say it in different languages. One year by the Chabad Malvern Second Seder, we had someone say it in Spanish, someone in Italian, in Yiddish, in Hebrew. It was quite a fun experience. Or youngest to oldest. The children are all preparing this, by the way, if they're in Jewish day schools, if they're going to Hebrew schools. This is something they're all prepared. They're going to be very excited about. In fact, this can very possibly be the highlight of your Seder. So it's a good opportunity. Maybe have someone in charge. You're the one in charge. You're putting together the order, oldest to youngest, youngest to oldest, something like that. You with me? So far. So we have Avadim Ayinu on the bottom of page 18, and the bottom of page 19. And that's the response. That's the answer that we give the children. And like I said last week, this is a great time for the prepared conversation about freedom, to use the freedom playing cards I introduced you to last week, or to have one person present an idea. By Avadim Ayinu is a great opportunity because it speaks about the idea of slavery, and we can make it very contemporary for ourselves. Next page. We're just going to fly through, and I'm going to show you how there's a current theme that goes on over here. All of a sudden on page 20, we have this story. It happened that Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Tarfon were reclining at a Seder in Bnei Brak, and they were discussing the exodus of the Egypt all night. What is going on here? Where does this story fit in? How does the story fit in here? How did it get here? Well, there's a direct link. There's a direct link. How did the last statement end? Even if all of us were wise, all of us understanding, all of us knowing of the Torah, we would still be obligated to discuss the exodus from Egypt. So to prove that, we bring a story of Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Tarfon, the greats, the great sages of their generation. We bring a story how these people were well versed in the story of Pesach, and nonetheless, here they were sitting all night once again discussing the story. They could have said, hey, we're wise. We know it all. We wrote it. Why do we need to discuss it? Well, the Hagaddah says, there's always something to learn. Every year has another message. Every year there's another point we're trying to bring out. And that's why the Hagaddah brings a story to show you. Let's prove the point. Even someone like Rabbi Akiva, not only did he discuss the story every year, he discussed it till the morning, where his students had to remind him that the night is up. It's time to finish. Time to say Shema. Time to daven Shachris. What else did the last paragraph say? And everyone who discusses the exodus from Egypt at length is praiseworthy. Here we have people that discussed it at length, and they've been canonized, so to speak, in the Hagaddah ever since. They're praised for the fact that they discussed it at length. Do you see the link now between the story and the Avadim Ayinu?
Where were the children?
They were there somewhere. The students were there. Then we have another story. Amar Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah. I'm not going to get into that story. You can read commentaries, but how does that story fit in? Well, presumably, this was the discussion that they were having by this Seder that we just mentioned. Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah was one of the members that we just mentioned who was sitting there discussing all night. So the next story is probably the discussion that they had on that night. Presumably. And by the way, the significance of the previous story, it's very significant because it's taking place at some of the darkest stages and hours in Jewish history. This was at the height of Roman oppression. Some of the sages that were mentioned in that first story would be killed as martyrs by the Romans, including Rabbi Akiva. And still, what were they doing in a time where Torah study and Torah practice was banned? There they were, still practicing Judaism. Not only that, in front of their students, that their students were there and their students remained inspired. So how much more so for people like us that can sit freely in the Western world and sit around our table and discuss the Hagaddah and discuss our story and our history. If they weren't rushed in the darkest of hours of Jewish history, from the comfort of our homes and freedom, we shouldn't be rushed. And again, Amar Rabbi Eliezer is probably what was discussed by that Seder. Okay, let's move on to the next page. Baruch HaMakom. Some may know the song, Baruch HaMakom. What are we doing here? Well, it's quite interesting. Before studying Torah, or before reading the Torah, what do? We make a blessing. And here, we're now about to mention some verses from the Torah. In fact, we're going to mention 4 verses from the Torah. So we make a blessing. That's what we're doing. Just like someone gets up, and when they read from the Torah, they make a blessing known as an aliyah, blessing by the Torah, a call-up. Well, in a more symbolic and miniature kind of way, we're making a blessing because we're about to start reading now actual verses from the Torah. And it's interesting how it goes, Baruch HaMakom, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shnatan Torah Lam Yisrael, Baruch Hu. It's probably because in the olden days when the Hagaddah was just written, there would be one person leading the Seder, and he would say something like Baruch HaMakom, and everyone would respond, Baruch Hu. Baruch Shnatan Torah Lam Yisrael, and everyone would respond, Baruch Hu. But today, everyone has Hagaddahs. There's not just one person leading. Everyone's involved over there. But something beautiful. How many times does it say the word Baruch, blessed, in that paragraph? 4 times. What's the significance of 4 times? 1 blessing for each child. At the end of the day, we acknowledge God's kindness for giving us children. In other words, even though we now will present the dynamics of some of the children that may present challenges to BPC, and some of the questions or the non-involvement of some of the children is challenging for us, but we begin, the preference is Baruch. The first thing is I say, I have no complaints in the sense I'm thanking Hashem for children. 1 Baruch for each child. Baruch, Baruch, Baruch. We're going to talk about a Chacham. We're going to talk about a Rasha. That's part of the conversation. But from the begin with, I acknowledge Hashem's kindness, giving me children, even though they may present some challenges. And we thank Hashem for giving us the wisdom of Torah to deal with each child according to their personality. And it's at this point that in the Hagaddah that we have the 4 children. Again, this is a great place for some practical discussion, for some sound bites and some tidbits, and I have placed in your student handout an example of trying to look at the 4 sons in a different kind of way. But again, this would be a great place during the Hagaddah to involve people. Okay, next page. This one doesn't have numbers. The page after the 4 sons, with the photos of people riding on camels. Here we have Yachol Merosh Chodesh, What we're doing over here is we're discussing when the Exodus should be recounted. And we make reference to the night of the Seder, and then we move on and we account all the way that the bondage and our liberation reaches early into our history. So this is really now the bulk of the story. This is the bulk of the Hagaddah. And the Haggadah is telling us that the story of the Jewish enslavement did not begin just in Egypt. It began way earlier, where it began with the idea of giving up monotheism and serving idols. That's really what this is doing over here. It's letting us know that the account of the bondage and the liberation reaches way earlier into our history. Middle of page 26. We thank Hashem for our freedom, and we sing the famous Vihisha Amda. The Vihisha Amda can be a continuation. We just spoke about the bond that Abraham had made with God. Maybe that's the Vihisha Amda. Maybe that is what stood by us all throughout the challenges of history. The last of the most famous modern Kabbalists, the Arizal, he says it's referring to our inner fountains of faith. And some say when we sing Vihisha Amda, this has stood by us, is the Seder. The fact that no matter what, come what may, Jews sat around the Seder table and reenacted that story, and that is what stood us by. That is the secret against any type of tyrant, anti-Semite that stands up against the Jewish people. And again, if you remember, one of the questions for discussion, an idea we spoke about last week is the Holocaust or contemporary anti-Semitism enough of a motivation to live Jewishly today? If that's a path you want to go down, if that's a discussion you want to have, this is a great opportunity. This is a great time where such discussion, the Vihisha Amda, you can sing it, and you can discuss it. What is it that stood by our fathers? This is what stood by our fathers and us. For not just one alone has risen against us to destroy us, but in every generation they rise against us to destroy us, and the Holy One, blessed be He, saves us. What is this? What is it referring to? Is it inner fountains of faith? Is it the family unit? Is it talking about the bond Avraham made with Hashem? What is it? Is it our resourcefulness? What is it? It's a good conversation to have. Bottom of page 26, and moving on to the next page, we continue our discussion in the Hagaddah, and we're about to now explain in detail about the exile and the redemption. Remember, right away in the Avadim Ayinu, we said, whoever goes on and prolongs the Seder experience and speaks about it in depth and at length is praiseworthy. And this is what we're referring to, the verses and the explanations on the verses, because now I'm not going to go through inside of it, but if you follow it along inside, you'll see that all it's discussing all the way up until, we can continue going all the way until the 10 plagues.
What do you say this is the section I lose?
This is the section you lose in. So this is the section you get one person, you say, you're in charge of reading, you take care of it, and we're going to go to the 10 plagues. If that's the section where you lose them, then get a printout and have a conversation about it, as opposed to everyone going around and reading this part. I'll show you some ideas. In other words, what is it more worth it, to continue reading inside the Hagaddah at this point and lose everybody? Or maybe take our focus out of the Hagaddah and start having some conversations that are meaningful and important to keep everyone focused? That's a question you have to ask yourself. It's at this point where maybe we can start moving out of the text. We've done the Manishtana, we've done the Avadim Ayinu, we've done the 4 sons, we've spoken about a little bit of how far back the exile began, and now maybe is a time where we can make it more practical and open up conversation, contemporary. So then we move on to the 10 plagues. Now, again, this is a great opportunity for the kids to get involved. As you have my danger, do not open box we spoke about last week, another thing to keep the anticipation going. By the way, here would be a good time to give an update on the special guests' arrival, where they're actually holding. The Uber got lost, something like that. Where you can open up the surprise black box, and with each of the 10 plagues, you can make it interactive as you go across. Moving on from the 10 plagues, what can I tell you? You have the bottom of page 36 all the way until the bottom of page 37 is a discussion about the plagues where it gets numbered back and forth and all that. There's a big chance that that's where you're going to lose people as well. So it might be a good time at this point to go to Dayenu. Now, which is on the bottom of page 38 and 39. Now, Dayenu is an amazing song. Besides for the fact that we grow up with it and everyone knows the tunes, Dayenu is actually something in our lives that we are missing so much. If there's one word that encapsulates what the Dayenu is all about, it's gratitude. That would be enough. If only we were given this, that would be enough. If only we were given that, then that would be enough. If only we were given this, then that would have been enough. It's an amazing song of gratitude, and it's a wonderful opportunity to have a very, very practical and meaningful discussion about gratitude at that time. Are we grateful for what we have in our life? What are we grateful for? And you don't need me to tell you that what science is actually showing, what Judaism has taught us such a long time ago, that incorporating real, meaningful gratitude into our daily routine has actual, significant, and substantial effects to our mental health and our mental well-being. Something Judaism has taught us from day one is something today that science is telling us as well. And in fact, the next song also, Alachat, is also, this page, is also discussing the different parts of the miracle that took place for us and how we're grateful for it. The next part of the Hagaddah is a focal point, is an important point, because we are now going to talk about the 3 most important things we do need to talk about by the Seder. Pesach, Matzah, and Maror. Remember I told you there's 4 things that we need to do. We need to say the story, we need to eat matzah, we need to eat some maror, and we need to drink some wine. Well, this is the discussion about that exact stuff. So if there was one part of the Hagaddah that you were going to focus on, you were going to use as some part to discuss that is directly related to the Hagaddah, you can choose somewhere from here, which is Pesach, Matzah, and Maror. Page 46 and 47, we move on to something which is called the beginning of Hallel. Just like the people did after the Exodus, we do the same. And again, a great discussion about Hallel, a great discussion about thankfulness, about gratitude. And then we continue with the next steps of Rachza, washing our hands, Moitzi and Matzah, Maror, Koirech, and all the other steps. Birkat Hamazon, finding the Afikoman, Finally, everyone goes to the door, and Eliyahu Hanavi makes their visit. But if there's one thing I want you to take away from the conversation that we had tonight is, number one, just to kind of have an appreciation for the theme and the thread of the Hagaddah. It's called a Seder for a reason. There is some kind of order to what we're doing, although our table and our house and our family may look like it's out of control and out of order, but the Hagaddah has its order. My suggestion for you is if you can use these 15 steps to bring order to the night, that's a wonderful way to keep order around the Seder. Now, ideas for tidbits. I want to introduce you, I had it on all night, I want to introduce you to a wonderful resource. It's an amazing resource. You can go on this resource for a half hour and you'll get everything you need for the night. Really, everything you need. You go on Chabad.org, you following me? You go to search, and you put in Pesach or Passover. You see that? Passover, Festival of our Liberation. It takes you to a mini site, and here you have everything you need. How to? That gives you the whole before Pesach. The Passover Seder, everything you need for the Seder. The Hagaddah, everything you're going to need for the Hagaddah. And then obviously there's multimedia, there's stories, the recipes, study and history. Everything you need there, everything you're going to need is right there. You want to do something on the five children, on the four sons. You could go on the Hagaddah. Here you have the 4 questions. Here you have printable Haggadahs if you want to print out, if you have a big crowd and you want to print out enough for everyone. If you want to be prepared with some thoughts on the Hagaddah, here you go in here. You want some tidbits instead of having long speeches. It's an unbelievable resource. If you want to have really a productive and a meaningful Seder, take off a half hour of your time, Chabad.org, search Pesach, go onto the mini site, everything you want. From recipes to how to clean, to on every word of the Hagaddah, some kind of insight where you can choose what is it that you would like to share. We'll conclude with that. I'm happy to send via email both the first week's and this week's handouts. And I really hope that this has given you a bit more of a command over the Hagaddah. You feel a bit more empowered when the night comes. What are the parts you're going to maybe skip over? It's Passover after all, so you have to pass over something. What are the parts you're going to focus on? And how you can make it as meaningful and productive as possible.